He opted out, and then he got the 5-year, $139 million deal with the Dodgers this offseason, which totals 6 years, $171 million, which is what he wanted the year before. So that's what he's trying to do with Alonso.
All right, here we go. We're back with Jim Bowden, analyst and insider for CBS Sports, joining us for a little session here with the front office focus. Okay, JB, I actually want to start with a little battle that we had last week between Steve Cohen and Scott Boras. So can you give us the tale of the tape? And who do you think won the fight when they put the boxing gloves on?
Yeah, look, this has been really fun to watch this play out because Pete Alonso has basically no leverage, right? And Steve Cohen knows that, who's also a great negotiator. But as they're trying to get to the finish line here, it's going to end up at a 3-year deal around 70 to 72 million with an opt-out, right? And I think both sides are close enough that this deal can get done when somebody wants to give, but it all comes down to structure. And I think when you study Scott Boras, and I negotiated with him for decades, he's pretty predictable in the way he thinks and the way he goes through a process. And I think if the Mets want to close the deal, you have to understand there's 2 ways to close the deal with him. Number one, you have to understand he wants to break a contract record. He's not going to do that in this case. He's not going to get the most years. He's not going to get the most money. He's not going to get the highest AAV for a first baseman. So you can nix that off. Number two, you have to give him a pathway to get the original contract he turned down or hit the long-term deal he was thinking he was going to get to the player. So how do you do that? Well, you give the player a short-term deal with an opt-out with a high AAV up front, and then you get him out and he gets the money on a second contract or a third contract for that matter, like he did with Blake Snell a year ago, right? He wanted to get him a 6-year, $170 million deal. He couldn't get it, so he signed a 1-year, $32 million deal with the Giants. He opted out. And then he got the 5-year, $139 million deal with the Dodgers this offseason, which totals 6 years, $171 million, which is what he wanted the year before. So that's what he's trying to do with Alonso. So if Steve Cohen and David Stearns could kind of look at this 70 or 72 million, however it's going to play out, and if they could find a way to front load the contract, if they can accept the opt-out with maybe a little bit of a payment if he opts out, to get him on pace to be able to do the same thing he did for Snell, that will get the deal done at the exact same guarantee money with deferrals that they're talking about right now.
That's incredible. I mean, at first, I got to just give you a little credit. The sweatshirt right now that you're rocking, it looks like you're about to go to a rap battle concert, and I respect that totally, dog. You're looking fresh. So if you want to spit a couple lyrics right now, just let us know. Let me talk a little bit about the Blue Jays, though, with this whole scenario. Are they out of it now, or is it just the Mets solely now? You talk about leverage. Is it the Mets only to get Pete, or is it the Toronto still trying to find a way to get him?
No, I think Toronto's in there just to try to show that there might be leverage. And of course, the way the basic agreement is written, teams can't say we're out on this player, right? That's part of the agreement that's there in the CBA. So Blue Jays can't say anything. And so, is it possible they could sign Alonso and move Guerrero to third? Sure. But my understanding is they're not in this thing at all. Not that they don't have interest, not that they wouldn't consider it if the price was right, but based on kind of where the Alonso camp is and where Pete wants to go, it doesn't seem to be an option. We've heard the San Francisco Giants, but Buster Posey is completely opposed to opt-outs. He does not want them. That's a real philosophical, in-cement viewpoint that he has right now in his first year running the Giants. So that's kind of out. The best fit for him is the Mariners, but they don't have any money, so they're not going anywhere. So, look, there's not a lot of options. This is a deal that I would be shocked at if it doesn't get done with the Mets. It's just a matter of both sides needing to give here at the end to get the structure so both sides can at least be satisfied. Look, Pete Alonso is going to lose this negotiation. It is what it is, but he needs to do the best he can to get the most money up front, like Cody Bellinger did with the Cubs 2 years ago, which was another Boras client, and then be able to opt out in 2 years and hope that the market for first baseman is better and that he can put up 2 years of 40 home runs a year.
What rule gets broken more? Attachment 49 or any other rule? Because Steve Cohen, we were talking about the Steve Cohen stuff, did he break the rule?
Technically, I don't think he did, but I understand the viewpoint and the warning that's out there. Look, when you have no leverage, you need the owners to behave because you have no other place to go. So you're sitting here in this particular situation, grinding it out, and you want to get the warning out from one of the media members that, hey, this is going to be in a violation. I can file a grievance. And in other words, it's more of a warning to the owners, stop it because you're affecting my negotiations.
All right, JB, I want to take us to the San Diego Padres. I'm still befuddled, although I understand there is significant ownership strife going on right now. But, we start hearing about Cease at the beginning, really, of the offseason. It sounds like it could be heating up a little bit. Michael King's name gets thrown around. At one point, it was Luis Ariz. So, hey, what do you think the Padres are going to end up doing this offseason as they've seen some of their very familiar faces go elsewhere, like Kim and Profar, and B, do you think this has to do with the legal battle that's going on with ownership, and that's preventing them from pushing forward with budget and positive activity versus trading guys off?
Well, it's definitely an ownership issue. There's no money, and they're projected to make significant losses. And so AJ has no money to work with. That's why he was hoping to be able to get Sasaki, even though he had a pre-cut deal with the Dodgers, apparently. He was hoping to get Sasaki and hoping that wasn't the case because you put Sasaki with King and Cease and Darvish, and you can still win, right? Now you didn't get Sasaki. You got Musgrove that's going to be out for the year. And so now he's looking at the team, realizing his best shot for the playoffs is a wild card spot, which he has a chance to, but no Profar, no Kim, as you mentioned, and no pathway to add anybody that's making any money because your orders are to cut payroll, not to add payroll. And then you've got the double conundrum in the fact that, okay, Luis Ariz is a free agent, Dylan Cease is a free agent. So now what are you going to do? So now you got to go to the market and say, okay, I can't extend either one. I probably, with a year out, instead of waiting to the trade deadline, should see what I can get now. You go through that process, and, as the Brewers learned a year ago with Corbin Burns, I mean, the price is Joey Ortiz and DL Hall, and that's best case scenario. That's all you're getting. It's not like you're trading Juan Soto. So, the trade value is not what it is. So then you say, well, what about Michael King? When you get King, you've got more control with him. Does that get it? So I think the Padres are looking at it two ways. Number one, we could go for it, try to get a wild card berth. If it doesn't work, we can make trades at the trade deadline to retool. Or let's see if we can't get 6 or 7 prospects for 3 of our better players now and kind of start this rebuild now, because financially it's not going to get any better. They've also gone down the path of saying, hey, we'll trade one of our top prospects with Xander Bogaerts if you take Bogaerts' contract. So they're trying to find other ways also to reduce payroll to try to afford to do other things. But, they put themselves in a tough corner. And until the ownership either provides more resources or gets settled, I don't see the Padres' situation in the front office changing until that changes.
Why have the White Sox not been able to move Lubob? Luis Robert is still a White Sox. I got the White Sox losing more than 121 games, and with Robert out of the lineup, they could accomplish that for me. But have you heard what is getting in the way of that?
Yeah, absolutely I have. So there have been some teams that have been in on Luis Robert. The Cincinnati Reds, Philadelphia Phillies are 2 of the teams that have had discussions with the Chicago White Sox. And what the White Sox want in return for Luis Robert is they want 2 legitimate top 5 prospects in your organization. I mean, they want 2 really good players. And right now, the teams that have talked to them are willing to give 1 really good player, but not 2. The reason being, when you give up a top prospect, that's a sure thing. You're going to control them for 6 years, et cetera, et cetera. Now, of course, in the Garrett Crochet trade, they got 2 legit top prospects, the catcher Kyle Teal and the right fielder Braden Montgomery, and they're hoping to get 2 more here, so they'll get 4 everyday players for the 2 stars that they trade. So I understand what they're trying to do. Now, they haven't been able to do that. So now the question is the player worth 2 good prospects? I would argue there's a pathway to say yes, but let's talk about the player. And then, Eric and Todd, you guys jump in on what you think of the player. So 2 years ago, we saw him at 38 homers. His rookie year, we saw him win a Gold Glove. We've seen him steal 20 bags, and we've seen the ridiculous athleticism and talent that's there. We've also seen a guy that doesn't always show up. We see a guy that loses focus in the outfield. We see a guy that doesn't seem to grind, doesn't seem to be 100% into the games. Now, partly because perhaps he's with one of the worst teams in baseball history, partly because there's no protection in the lineup. There's all kinds of excuses that we can give But if you're giving up two really good prospects, I don't want just a potential star player. I also want a guy that wants to play, that's a winning player, because the last 2 years of my 3-year deal with him is going to be $20 million a year, which makes it more difficult to give up. So I think what has to happen, to answer your question, Eric, I think he has to get to spring training, show that he's healthy, and be performing at the level we saw 2 years ago, playing with enthusiasm. And I think if that happens, there's still a chance he's traded by opening day.
This is my universal sign for no, I don't have a big nose. It's I completely agree with you, and I'm only looking from the outside. The talent is there, but I couldn't agree more with you. I mean, he needs to show me he wants to go and play for the Phillies. He wants to go and play for a team that's contending.
Right.
Talent goes so far. Maybe Todd has a different view.
No, I agree 100%. You talk about a grinder. I'm looking for those grinders, the guy that's going to come in early and show these young guys how it's really done. Stay later. Hey, I need 10 to 15 more flies. I need, can we work on this? Come here, young buck. Let me show you how it's supposed to be done. And we just haven't seen that. So ultimately, at the end of the day, it's now or never. If you want the truth, it's go time. The guy can hit, and we all know that. So,
and then the other thing you have to do, if you're a team, is you got to have players in your clubhouse that can help get the most out of the player. I remember, when I was a GM, I brought in a couple of players, Tony Fernandez and Benito Santiago, that had great talent, but we had some of the same questions about them. But I had a Barry Larkin and a Lenny Harris in that clubhouse, and I didn't have to worry about it because they would be on those guys. And as Barry Larkin told me one day, he said, we can have one bad apple and be fine. We just can't have a lot of them. And so when you look at a Robert, he is a good fit for Cincinnati. Put him in center field, let all the other outfielders platoon, but to have that power in that ballpark, it is 40 home runs. The defense helps the pitching staff because it's not a great defensive team. So it's a really good fit. But do you have the guys in the clubhouse? Can Matt McClain and Ellie De La Cruz, can those guys get him? I know Terry Francona will hold him accountable, but those are questions that front offices have to ask. Do you have the guys that fit? Now, I would argue the Phillies definitely have that in Kyle Schwarber and Bryce Harper. So to me, if I were confident that that guy could work there, I definitely feel confident with the Phillies.
So last one for me, I want to talk about the Mariners a little bit and how they have this set budget. I mean, nowadays you're seeing teams go over the tax threshold. You see all this. I want to bring up Jerry DiPoto a little bit, man. Is he doing a good job, or does he need to get after a little bit in the trade market and finding guys to get on this squad? I mean, we've heard about the story by Mike Petriello about how their park is one of the hardest to hit in as well. So, what does Jerry have to do here, with a set budget? I mean, is there more he can do?
Yeah, I mean, you have to. I mean, first of all, the reason the Mariners are where they are is because of ownership not providing the money to win. And when you have the best five-man rotation, arguably in the American League, or at least top two in the American League, you should be not only in the playoffs, but a chance to win a World Series. And you should be doing everything you can to add two bats to a team that would be completely different with two impact bats. So the fact that you're not spending money now when you have a window to win makes no sense. Spend it now and make up for it 3 years from now or 4 years down the road when your team doesn't have the window anymore. So managing the long-term ownership, it's a huge mistake what they're making. Now, in terms of Jerry, look, he's as aggressive as you can find. He hasn't gotten the job done, and this is a result-oriented business. There were first basemen traded this offseason that would have fit in their budget. Josh Naylor went from the Guardians to the Diamondbacks. Jake Berger went from the Marlins to the Rangers. Both of those guys would have fit perfectly with the Seattle Mariners. So there were options out there. He also has 7 players in the top 100 prospects in baseball. So he's got prospects that he can trade. Also, a team like the Tampa Bay Rays have Yandy Diaz, who they would trade because they have Trey Morgan and they've got Xavier Isaac coming. So, they would be open to a deal there, and they would love a prospect deal because the Mariners are loaded in that area. So there is more that Jerry can do. He also has to get creative, whether he wants to or not. In other words, I know Louis Castillo's contract is too much for some teams, right? I mean, he's $24 million a year, and he's got several more years left on the deal. If you have to eat $4 or $5 million a year of it, then you eat it. I know Mitch Haniger's got a bad contract at $15 million. Eat half of it. Trade him at $7.5 million. but you've got to find a way to get the bats. I mean, you can't tell me that there wasn't a time that you could have gotten Tristan Cassis from the Red Sox or Kobe Mayo from the Orioles or Ryan Mountcastle from the Orioles for that matter. I mean, there has to be deals that can be made. Jerry's been one of the most aggressive GMs since he got to Seattle. It's surprising they haven't done much. But I will say this, he is trying. I know that from opposing GMs. So he has been out there aggressive. But this is the time really where an owner should wake up on the right side of the bed and tell Jerry, go get me Alonso and Bregman tomorrow because I can afford both, which they can.
All right, you're on the inside of these deals. Last year, Kike Hernandez came on here and said, ironically, the same day, within an hour, I got an offer for the same amount of years and the same amount of dollars. And this has happened to two other of my friends who I won't mention. Again, kind of that fringe type of player, definitely a big leaguer, not a superstar. From your seat as a GM,
yeah,
how can you explain this, that the Oakland A's and the Cincinnati Reds both offer 2 years, $2.9 million, and not say, oh, it is not collusion?
Yeah, okay. So this is the way I'm going to answer, Eric, is the following. Number one, Major League Baseball hires some of the most expensive lawyers in the country. And ever since you had that collusion in the 80s, when Peter Ueberroth was the commissioner, the teams are very careful to make sure that all of the lawyers go through everything the commissioner's office and the teams do to make sure that they can never be called for collusion again. Now, that being said, in this world, we all have loopholes in everything we do. So how do you do a loophole? Simple. It is legal for teams to get from the commissioner's office, based on their data and research, where do you see a player's value? Here's a particular player. What is Pete Alonso worth? Okay, well, the AAV, the way we see it, is $22 million a year. Okay, so now all of a sudden, Pete Alonso gets a bunch of offers about $22 million a year. So, the commissioner's office, the labor relations department, the 30 clubs all share similar information on all of these players. All of them are well aware what everyone has made in the past, how many years, how many dollars. They slot players in based on career performance, platform years of where the value should be. And every time a value goes beyond that, the industry gets really upset because it changes the landscape for everybody else. That's why arbitration numbers have always gone this way. That's why whenever you get a superior talent like Juan Soto, all of a sudden it goes to another planet. But when it goes to another planet, they try to make sure the rest of the industry doesn't as best they can. So, yeah, I mean, look, if you asked me to value a certain player and gave me 3 hours to do that, I would come up to with a very similar year and dollar number that the other 30 clubs would make. And if I'm going to make the same offer, I guarantee you the Blue Jays made the same offer as most teams on all the free agents, because that's what they do. They make market offers. The teams that actually get the free agents, like the Yankees and the Dodgers, they actually just pay a little bit more to make sure they get them.
Making the same offer, then you're just putting it in their hands.
Yeah.
You want to actually win the player. You got to go over the computer algorithm. It doesn't sound that complicated, but apparently it is for some number crunchers. Well, Jim, on our way out here, we just want to give a shout out to your son, Chad. You've got amazing children who are super talented, but Chad just took center stage with the way that he led Notre Dame to a title game, right? And he's the GM of that team for the past, what was it, year or two? For a year, yeah. Well, that was pretty quick to be able to turn them into a ridiculous contender, and now he's going to do the same operation over at USC, and so we'll be expecting to see them in some championship games as well. But just we wanted to give a congrats here on FT, because I know Chad hustles his butt off. Yeah,
thanks. It means a lot to me. I'll tell you, when he won the Director Recruiting of the Year award in college football, he called me to make sure I knew that he did it at a younger age than I was Executive of the Year. And when he was named GM, he told me, I just want to remind you, I got there before you did, even though you were the youngest in baseball history. I got there younger. And then he reminded me yesterday that he's now being paid more money than I've ever been paid. So, yes, he's a lot of success at 30 years old. I'm proud of him. He's done this on his own. He's worked hard. And The only thing I taught all my kids is someone's going to be smarter, someone's going to be better looking, someone's going to have more money, someone's going to be more athletic. But at the end of the day, the one thing you can do is you can outwork everybody, and you can surround yourself with better people than they can. And if you do both of those things, you will win. And that's the advice I gave him, and that's the advice that he's followed, and I'm glad it's worked for him.
Oh, yeah.
No doubt.
I mean, clearly it's in the bloodlines. You know,
No doubt about
it. The young GM in MLB,
Dream,
and then
dream
the
come
young
true
GM
for a
in
father, for
college
sure.
football, which is
Amen.
kind of like pro football these days. So, JB, awesome catching up with you. We'll get you again next week.
Sounds good.
Hey, everybody. Be sure to like and subscribe for more content.
We're back here every weekday, all year long, so do not miss an episode.
The videos are coming in all day. Here's another video you might enjoy.
Baseball the way it should be covered.